Psalm chapter 1, I am so excited to preach to you the first message that I ever preached. I was a teenager, and it probably wasn't put together real great. It has morphed over the years. I've preached it a number of times, and the Lord's led me to preach it again today. And you've got a handout in your hand and see the title there, 3 Peas and a Tree. Yep, that's what it was called, and we could probably do better, but I've always kept the title the same. I last preached it 10 years ago. 10 years ago this month, we had just returned from a sabbatical. After 20 years, my church in Illinois sent us on a sabbatical, a 9-week time to get away. And they said, don't even call in while you're gone. I had a great associate who could take care of everything. There for a second, I thought maybe they were getting rid of me. But no, it was all still there when we got back. And we were there many years after that as well. I preached it after that sabbatical because I needed it. The message that God had put in my heart as a teenager and that I had preached different places over the years, He hit me over the head with it to get me back to the basics. And I share it now, hoping that it can be a blessing to you because I need it now once again. You know Psalm 1 and verse number 3 that says of the blessed man, he shall be like a tree. You probably have memorized this verse or perhaps memorized the passage of Psalm chapter 1. The first 2 verses talk about the blessed man, and let's read verse 3 together aloud. Ready? And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. God has planted us like a tree for a purpose. We have a purpose, and it takes power to fulfill that purpose. And that power flows through purity. These are the 3 P's. We have a purpose, it'll take power, and it comes through purity. And it's a strange title and kind of juvenile, but like I said, God has led me to get back to being myself. And so here's a question for you this morning, and let me just tell you, it's a trick question, but I still want you to answer. Can a tree bear fruit? This is the question. Can a tree bear fruit? What's the answer to that? Yes, a tree can bear fruit. But I said it's also a trick question. If you get real technical about it, can a tree in and of itself produce fruit? What else does it need? What? Water? Our brother has a good garden behind his house. Without water, nothing would be growing there, right? What else does it need? It needs the sun. That's right. Some trees require some care, or at least to do well and to really bear fruit. So you could look at it from a different angle and say, in and of itself, no, a tree cannot bear fruit. It needs these things in the strictest sense. Well, my answer today is a little bit in between. And I want you to really wrap your head around this thought because God really blessed me with it. Yes, a tree can bear fruit. Write it down. For a while. For a while. If the sun were to cease shining, trees would stay alive for a while. They still would, because of what the sun had put into them, the nutrients and the water that their roots had sucked up. They could still go on for a while. If we were put out in the dark, a complete blackout, trees would live for a little bit. There'd be some fruit. We'd probably be after it. We'd probably be hoarding it because of the natural disaster going on. Yes, it can bear fruit, but only for a while. It can draw from those internal resources. We've seen this summer that trees can do with very little water or no water for a time. But it's probably going to rain the next couple of days, and good thing, because it's been pretty dry, and eventually the trees would die. The grass would die. Terry wouldn't have to mow it anymore. That's an upside of that. But pretty much trees would turn into weeping willows. We're introduced in our text to the blessed man. Look at verse 1. Blessed is the man. Let's just pronounce it blessed. Blessed is the man. But do we really understand what it means to be blessed? Now today I consider myself a very blessed person. But again, it's how you look at things. Are we talking in material ways? I've been blessed with a lot of things. Tell me if I'm right on this. I believe I'm blessed with a good wife. Am I? Yes or no? I am. She just had to take the boy out. I am blessed with a good family. Yes or no? Am I blessed to pastor a good church? Yes or no? Aren't I blessed with good looks? Don't lie in church. But in a way, I've not been blessed, not in the way that our text is talking about. Let's go a little deeper. We're blessed with every breath we take, blessed to be alive. You could say, I'm blessed that God hasn't got fed up and destroyed me and wiped us all out. We could say we're blessed to be saved. But all of these answers still don't mean that we are the blessed man written of in Psalm 1. There's different meanings to blessing. If I sneeze, I might get blessed. When I do something stupid and God saves me from my foolishness, I've been blessed in a sense. I told you about riding a motorcycle as a teenager and showing off for a friend who was on the back and should have died that day, was going off a cliff on a mountain when God picked up the bike and set it up straight on the middle of the road. As I opened my eyes, wondering why I hadn't impacted as I was expecting to and why I was still alive, he said, I didn't have to do that and I won't do it again. I was blessed. My stupidity. I've told you that story. A story I don't believe I've told you was when we were on that sabbatical 10 years ago. We were camping. We took our fifth wheel, which is at the top. We don't have it any longer. At the top of the air conditioner, it was 13 feet, 2 inches high. So you got to think of yourself as like the big rigs, like the trucks. And as we were going through New York City, I was just following my GPS and nearly got the whole family killed. Taking a shortcut, even though it says no semis, I'm saying, well, I'm not a semi. Yes, really, you should consider yourself a semi when you're that tall. And as you know, I'm not used to being tall. And so I get on a parkway. Have you ever been to New York City and know these parkways? They're 4-lane, they're like a highway, but they go right through the heart of town, and they're meant to make good time, which was my idea, but they all have these little overpasses that are arches, brick arches. And I come to the first one, and it says 12 foot 9 inches, and I'm 13'2". And I'm realizing, what am I going to do? And I'm doing 70 miles an hour like everybody, and it's right there. But because it arches, I say, surely they're measuring the low side. You know, they're like a lawyer, they're going to take the most conservative answer. And so I've fudged my way over on the people into the very middle and went under and went like this, like it really helps to duck your head. You know, it makes the whole camper shorter, as you know. And we didn't hit. And we come around the corner to the next one that said 10-7. 10-7. And then I saw this beautiful sight, an exit ramp right before it, and I veer onto that and screech to a halt up there, and I'm sitting there looking at my phone trying to figure out what am I going to do and trying to get my breath when a guy pulls up beside me and honks. He's a New Yorker. He says, "Hey, you know you're not supposed to be here." I said, "Yeah, no kidding." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, I-95, heading south. He said, "Me too. It's going to be some streets through the city here, but follow me." And we start going down these narrow streets in residential areas where everybody's parked on both sides of the road. You know how New York City is. There's not enough parking, so people are piled up all over the place. And I'm watching my rearview mirrors, and I'm passing cars by this much, parked cars on both sides, just barely clearing. So I'm going slow, and everybody's out in their yards and on their porches, and as they see me coming, they're all going like this. And they watch me go by and see then our license plate on the back, Illinois, and they're all going like this. Yeah. Somehow God got us through that. I felt so blessed to be alive and blessed to make it through, even though it was like the Griswolds crossed with the Beverly Hillbillies. None of these blessings that I've mentioned so far today are what Psalm 1 is talking about. The truly blessed man is not just blessed in temporal things, but in eternal blessings. It's forever. It never ends. It never stops. It never dies. Look at verse 3. After it says, "He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bringeth forth his fruit in his season," it says, "His leaf also shall not wither." These blessings don't go away, and this fruit never completely goes away. He keeps bearing fruit. Notice the phrase, "in his season." It means it will come and go a little bit. There'll be some waxing and waning of your fruit as a Christian. And yet those leaves are evergreen, year-round, even on sabbatical, even on vacation, even when you have a bad day, even when you make a foolish decision. This tree continues to produce. Now, I hope you're still hanging with this because we haven't even got to the real points yet. The blessed man is like this. He has the blessing of God upon him because he has the blessing of God in him. In him. Even when things aren't great outwardly, even when he doesn't have things and material blessings, even when he loses part of the family, even when tragedy strikes, even when outward things are not what you would call blessed, he's still the blessed man because he has something in him. According to verse 3, he has something akin to the Midas touch. You remember those old commercials for Midas? You have the Midas touch based on King Midas. This verse says, "Whatsoever he doeth shall prosper, shall bear fruit." Now, it used to be said of me, I said used to be said of me, everything he touches turns to gold. They used to say that of a younger Jerry, and if only that were really true. Of course, I'd look pretty silly running around with the inside of my nostrils shining 24 karat. But anyway, everything he touches turns to gold, they would say that. And I had some claims to fame over my years academically in the top 10 and had lettered in some sports and that sort of thing. Had some neat successes in ministry. My parents started me early with junior church and bus routes, and they just boomed, and God blessed some wonderful things. And in ministry, a lot of big things have happened over the years and are still happening through Grace Notes. And yes, Jerry Shirley, they said, everything he touches turns to gold. No, it's really not true. He's only the blessed man when he acts like the guy in verse 1. Now, who is that guy? Well, he's the guy that I want to be. Psalm 1:1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, leaves the old crowd, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. really what we have to do is look at this passage backwards. If we go backwards from verse 3 to 2 to 1, we'll understand it better. I said the 3 P's are that we have a purpose. Number 1 today, please write it down. We are planted for a purpose. He shall be like a tree. On the wall is a picture today of a tree planted by the river of water, like a river glorious. God plants us. He places us. He puts us right where he wants us. And we are wise to bloom where we are planted, to dig in, to put down roots, and to stay where he puts us. We were in our church in Illinois twice as long as any pastor they'd have in all of their history, because I was taught you go and stay. And if not for a medical need in the family, we'd still be there now. But yet God had a purpose to replant us somewhere else, and we're so thankful for that. We are planted for a purpose, and we should bloom where we are planted. Write it down. You were planted in the family in which God wanted you. You had no choice. You didn't pick your parents. They didn't even pick you. But God did. He planned it out. He chose wisely according to his will. Now, we can look back at our upbringing and the family that we were born into, and maybe we had a bad experience. We could pick apart our situation. Even those of us who were very blessed could say, I wish this was different or that was different. And some would say, I can't think of anything good about it. We could pick apart our situation with all its faults. Maybe it was completely dysfunctional. Maybe it was great and then things fell apart. With all its faults, we could pick things apart. But I'm here to remind you today, folks, that in the grand scheme of things, our God makes no mistakes, and we are planted with a purpose, on purpose. And he has you right where he wants you. Do you believe today that God makes no mistakes in the grand scheme? Do you believe that? Because sometimes in the moment we feel like, seems like he's forgotten, or seems like he's mad, or he's punishing me, or seems like he doesn't even know where I'm at, or doesn't even care. You were planted in the family he wants you in. You were planted in the neighborhood that he wants you in. You may think you chose that house because of the price or the school district or the wallpaper, but God was working on a whole different level. You were planted in your workplace for a specific purpose. You're planted in this church for a purpose. I'll take it further. Your nether regions are planted on the pew on which they are planted at this very moment for a purpose that's higher than any of us can fathom. He puts us where he wants us. He plants us. We travel around and people ask us where we live. Ohio, a place only the will of God can take you. Right? I'm proud to say that I was planted here in Ohio for a purpose. And like Paul said, we should learn in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. We can all pick apart negatives of our situation. The grass is always greener somewhere else, right? I want you to know I'm not here for the amenities. I'm here because God planted me for a purpose, and we should bloom where we are planted. And yet verse 3 isn't talking about the various places that I just named, like the family, the church, the work, the neighborhood in which we're planted. It's saying that we are all, look this way, everyone, scan the room now. We got this nice rounded auditorium. It's easy to see everyone else. Look around you and take this in. Every one of us were actually planted in the exact same place. They say the 3 L's of real estate are what? Say it with me. Location, location, location. We were all originally planted, write this down please, in the best location you can ask for, right on the river. Right on the river. And so, it doesn't really matter if you had a poor life as a child. It doesn't really matter if you hate your job. I don't care if you do live on the wrong side of the tracks. I don't care if you live in a van down by the river. As long as you point your roots to the river, you can bloom, you can be blessed where you were planted. Now look at this picture on the wall of a tree that's right there planted on the river. What if this tree that's got this access to all these riches were to take these roots you see here in the lower left and only point them away from the river over this direction? What would happen to that tree? It had access to the best, but it pointed in the wrong direction. A tree can produce fruit for a while, but not forever, not without help. Sooner or later, it needs to tap into something outside of itself, a resource outside of itself. So that was number one, we're planted with a purpose. Number two, it takes power to fulfill our purpose on this earth. Verse number 3 does not say that the tree, you shall be like a tree planted in the river. Planted in the river. No, it says by the river. We have the choice whether we point our roots to the river or not. And our purpose is to be a tree where we are planted, but it's going to take power to fulfill that. And that power is found only in the river of life, the water of the word. Point your roots to the river. Every day, point your roots to the river. I told you we were on a sabbatical. Again, 10 years ago. It was our first week out that I had my biggest revelation. And it's so simple. And God hit me over the head with it. What a boneheaded moment I had when God hit me over the head with this. And by the way, why were we on sabbatical? There was no problem. I wasn't depressed or suicidal. I wasn't looking for a new church. I didn't have a midlife crisis. That's still to come. I wasn't looking for a convertible. Kimberly had just turned 40, but I wasn't looking to trade her in for 220s. She said, that's okay, because you're not even wired for 220. Why were we on a sabbatical? It was a spiritual fatigue from giving out and feeding others until I gave out. And I was running on empty. And my wife and my deacons and my associate pastor knew that I repeatedly used the phrase, I reached down and there's nothing there. It's like the well has gone dry, I said. The well. I've preached thousands of sermons from the well, and it's like I reached down and the well has gone dry. Now that's a problem for a church because the people in the church have a right to a good meal when they come sit in the church. You've got other things to do with your time if you can't get fed at church. You deserve some good stuff, and I felt like I had run out. And so God gave me a great revelation on the first week of sabbatical as he reminded me of the first sermon that I ever preached. And he hit me over the head and said, duh, the well is not in you. As a tree, you cannot produce fruit. Oh, for a while you can. But you're going to need to point your roots to the river, big boy, or you're not going to be able to stay in the ministry, and you're not going to have a fruitful, good Christian experience. The well is not in me. Christian, like a tree that you are, you can go on in your own strength for a while, but you'll eventually peter out. Your leaf will wither. Your fruit will diminish. You'll turn into a weeping willow and eventually a big plot of weeds rather than becoming the tree that you were planted to be. Why? Because number 2 says it takes power to fulfill the purpose for which we were planted. Of fruit bearing. Look this way, please. I'm happy to tell you good news. You were planted right on the river. right on the river. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. And so let's decide to point our roots to the river. It's quite a flow. It's a fountain that will never run dry. What is not acceptable is letting our fountain run dry because we failed to point our roots to the river. Now, we all draw our strength from somewhere. And in verse 1, we see that the blessed man is blessed in part because he doesn't point his roots toward sin. In verse 2, we see where he does delight to point his roots. Let's look at verse 2. His delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. There's 2 times each day that we're supposed to meditate on the Word of God. What are those 2 times? Day and night. Or in a word, all the time. Now let's just be transparent and honest today. We all medicate daily. I medicate. I may not be on medication, but I medicate. Don't you? We all medicate in some way. We all point our roots in certain directions to get us through the day, to draw our strength. We have any coffee addicts in the room who want to admit it? Be drug-free, I say. Maybe it's 5-hour energy that you medicate with. Maybe it is actual medication. Maybe you get through work by watching the clock for that break, or lunch is this long away, or the end of the day whistle. Hey, newsflash for you. God came to give us life, and life more abundant than that. He's planted us for a purpose, but it's going to take the power of the water of the Word if we're going to have joy and purpose and fulfill His will for our lives. And so I call you out today, dear Christian. As your spiritual leader, I implore you to point your roots to the river. And I pray for you to do that, and pray for me to do that and to better do that. And then as your spiritual leader, I say, as Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. And if I don't follow Christ, then don't follow me. But let's all together point our roots toward the river and stop medicating with a drink or a puff or a shot or a pill, and rather get up in the morning and point our roots to the river. Say, Lord, fill her up. And you'll never run dry, and you'll never thirst for anything else. Even Christians, some Christians, medicate using their television. They spend maybe 2 hours a week in church, but maybe 4 hours every day just looking at a screen because it's glowing. And here's one in my pocket too. It glows. You can medicate with TV, with movies, to just get through your day. This will pass a couple hours right here. You can medicate with music and have the earbuds in 24/7. You can medicate with the old crowd. That's what verse 1 warns us against. You can medicate with hobbies. Nothing wrong with a hobby, but is that what you live for? Where you spend your money, that's what you're living for. You can medicate with Facebook and social media. You can medicate with food. Ouch. Did I just say that? But it's true, right? We can. We do. I do. Some medicate with career, some with money, some with sex, some with things. It's so basic. But most of us aren't doing this very basic thing. So we must get back to the basics of being in the book, pointing our roots to the river. Can I have an amen today? That's the blessed man. Point your roots to the river. We are planted for a purpose. Number 1, it takes power to fulfill that purpose. Number 2, number 3, that power flows through purity. Verses 1 and 2, lists sins of commission and sins of omission. The irony of these verses: sin will keep you from the word, and yet the word will keep you from sin. So what's it going to be? Which is going to keep you from which? You want the real Midas touch? I'll tell you what's better than the Midas touch: the touch of God. And he does not put his almighty hand into a filthy glove. His power flows through purity. That's why this person is blessed. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. His power comes from that purity and letting the Lord flow that power through him, through that clean vessel, putting us on like a clean glove. Purity is something you could suck up by the roots if you just point your roots toward the river. You know what else the roots can suck up? Bad stuff, if we point in the wrong direction. Point your roots to the river. Let the purity flow through your veins and produce fruit and prosper. Don't be a sap. Be a sapling. A branch of new life, purposing to grow for God. Did you notice in verse 1, backsliding is a process. It's a slippery slope. We take a little counsel with the ungodly, and then we progress to standing with them. Before you know it, you're sitting down in the gates of the city with them. What a slippery slope. You're one of them. Let me close with this challenge and we're done. If it's possible for this pastor to spiritually backslide and point my roots in all kinds of wrong directions, then it's possible for you. If I can mistakenly serve the Lord with some success in the power of my own flesh for a time, so can you. But if I can be a Christian hypocrite, though I'm a pastor, who doesn't spend time in the Word, so can you. It can happen to any of us. Good news, if I can be corrected by God and get things back in order, so can you. Let's get back to the basics, back to the beginning. For me, it's back to my first sermon. For you, it's getting back to the book where it all happened. If you're glad today that you're saved and that you were planted right by the river, then stand to your feet right now. We've got access to it, folks. Let's point our roots to the river. Dear Heavenly Father,